Irish American history, like any history, has tons of myths and legends surrounding it. And in this video, I'm going to take down the 3 most common myths you'll hear about Irish history in the Americas. So the first one is when the first St. Patrick's Day parade happened in the Americas. It's way earlier than you're going to expect. The second one is the most Irish place in the Americas. It's not New York, it's not Boston, it's somewhere completely different. And thirdly is the most common myth you'll read about Irish American history online. That's the idea that Irish people were slaves. So I'm going to take those down in this video. My name is Finn Dwyer. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, Transatlantic and Irish American History Podcast. You can get links to that in the show notes below. Episode 1 launches next Monday, and it's on who the first Irish person to cross the Atlantic was. So when do you think the first St. Patrick's Day in America was? You might go to somewhere like New York or Boston, and they do have really old St. Patrick's Day parades. They go all the way back to the 18th century. But the oldest recorded St. Patrick's Day parade took place in St. Augustine in Florida. It was a Spanish settlement, and back in the year 1600, an Irish priest who was living in that Spanish settlement, a guy called Richard Arthur, organised the first known event for St. Patrick's Day in the Americas. So if I asked you what the most Irish city in America was, you'd probably reach for somewhere like New York or Boston, maybe Chicago, somewhere like that. The actual answer is a place called Butte, Montana, and it still has one of the highest concentrations of Irish people anywhere in the US. And it's all down to this guy, Marcus Daly, a cabin man and a mine owner. He opened a famous copper mine in Butte, and he hired thousands of Irish people to work in that mine, starting a community that right up to the present makes Butte the most Irish city in America. The most common myth you read about Irish history online these days is that Irish people were slaves in the US. No historian anywhere supports this. It's based on a completely discredited book, this one over my shoulder here. But today, no historian anywhere claims or even supports this idea. The history just doesn't support it. If you want to read about Irish slaves and that myth, and particularly where it comes from and some of the bad faith actors that push it, check out a historian called Liam Hogan. He has written extensively on this, and you'll find out the true story behind that. But basically, when you read about Irish people being slaves in the US, it's simply not true. If you want to hear more fascinating stories from Irish American history, subscribe to Transatlantic and Irish American History Podcast. It's made by myself, Finn Dwyer, and Damien Shields. And each week we're going to be tackling different stories from Irish American history. So next week it launches on Monday, September the 9th, and we're talking about who the first Irish person to cross the Atlantic was. It's a fantastic episode. Subscribe in the show notes below and you'll get that when it drops on Monday.